Good afternoon, everybody. My name is AJ Kuftic. I'm a digital product strategist with Expedient. I want to thank you for joining me today as part of our first session of our cost optimization month. We're doing a series of webinars this month around cost optimization, and we hope you join us for all of them. Today, the first one, though, is how to optimize costs across clouds. I'm going to goof that up a couple times throughout the month, probably. For those of you who are new to our webinars, please go ahead and enter those questions about here, I think, right about here, into the Q&A panel. That helps us keep track of the questions. I'll be answering all the questions at the end of the session. If you ask a question, you're entered to win a prize. That prize today is a $100 Amazon gift card. And all of this is being recorded. So if you have to step away, you want to show this to somebody, if you feel seen by one of the slides in here, which I'm pretty sure you will be, you'll get a link to the recording afterwards. It'll also be available on our website, go.expedient.com/webinar replays, instagram.com/_expedient, got it right that time, and linkedin.com/expedient and youtube.com/expedient. Go ahead and give us a follow on all of those services. For those of you who are new to Expedient, we've evolved over the years. We started in co-location in 2001. Today, we have 12 data centers in 8 cities. In 2007, we released virtual co-location. We were doing cloud before it was cool. And today, that's evolved into our enterprise cloud. In 2015, we released push-button DR to provide the fastest failover in the industry with a really powerful DR as a service platform. In 2018, we released Enterprise Cloud to provide a full cloud operating model for your VMware workloads without all of the refactoring. And in 2020, we released Cloud Native to power fully managed Kubernetes, persistent container storage, and full observability for your next generation applications. And this year, we've been focusing heavily on multi-cloud, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And speaking of multi-cloud, you're probably using more than one cloud today. And we know this not because we're creepy, but because we literally asked you a couple months ago as part of our Cloud Difference series, where we asked you, the audience, how many clouds you're using today. And more than half of you said 2 or more. Analysts have shown that most customers are using 2 or more clouds. So it's not unheard of for customers to be there, but we kind of have to take a step back and wonder, how did this happen? And well, this is probably how. And when I said you're probably going to feel seen, this is what I mean. It's okay. I've been here too. This may feel like I'm taking you on a little trip down memory lane, but follow me on this. It usually started with different teams. App Team 1, App Team 2, App Team 3 decided to go out and look at the various clouds, right? Because they weren't getting what they needed from IT, or what they wanted to build was going to be very, very expensive for them to go build on-prem versus just utilizing as a service from someone else. But this leads to decoupled thinking. There wasn't really a plan overall. Each individual team said, this is what we're going to do for our specific needs. And so the snake of pain begins. One team migrates a bunch of apps to AWS. Great. So I have to set up identity and security, compliance and connectivity to AWS. Sure, great, wonderful, we'll go figure that out. And maybe IT wasn't even involved and they didn't even do that part. They just kind of figured it out as they went. And then a second team comes along and builds 2 net new apps on Azure. Again, identity, security, compliance, connectivity to Azure. Okay, we could probably manage that. Or maybe again, the dev team just decided to go do it, and here's some accounts and a credit card, and we'll figure it out later. And then finally, a dev team and maybe a couple other teams in their business unit said, you know what, we really like Google. And what's not to like? It's a very nice cloud. But they have 22 net new applications into Google Cloud. Again, identity, security, compliance, connectivity to that cloud. And now I've got 3 clouds, and I didn't try to. And it just gets worse, because now I'm containering apps on premises. So now I have a number of these sorts of pieces on-prem. We have databases migrating to AWS, but that might not be the same team. So now they want to go set up their own account. Now I've got machine learning going to Google Cloud. That might also be a different team. So I have 2 different teams using Google, 2 different teams using AWS. Now my data warehouse team says, oh, we want to use some of this, but we don't want to get rid of all of our stuff on-prem. So now we're split into 2 different sites. Now my IoT systems get built on top of Azure. And because all of these people are going to the cloud, a bunch of other groups said, well, we want to do that too. Now I've got 100 plus cloud projects on the horizon, not to mention the 8 that I have here already. This is getting out of hand. And because there's a bunch of decoupled thinking here, there's no single security approach. There's no single governance approach, and there's no operational planning. And that's because nobody's really looking at this holistically. How do we actually go do that? There's no strategy. This isn't multi-cloud. This is multiple cloud. That's not the same thing. And so what ensues is pain. No one wants to try to go clean this up. And so now I've got accounts everywhere, I've got a mess everywhere, and now I have to wrangle it all back together. And instead of moving forward, I have to take 2 steps back to clean it up. So let's take those steps back, right? What is a way to optimize our things? We have to have something to optimize against, right? You don't just make a bunch of tweaks and hope for the best. We have to optimize against a goal, because I'm going to let you guys in on a little secret here. Cloud's not always cheaper. Sorry if I burst anybody's bubble there, but it's not always cheaper. But what it does do is it optimizes your cost against your usage. And so we have to figure out what it is that we're going to use and why we're going to use them. It starts with our main goal. And in the traditional infrastructure space, it's to get out of the data center, because data centers, as we as Expedient know, we have 12 of them, they're very expensive. They cost a lot to maintain, they cost a lot to renovate, and growing is really, really hard, right? AC, power, space. If I want to extend the literal physical space of my data center, I have to build a bunch of walls, and then I got to take out the one in the middle. It's not an easy thing to do. And it's very, very expensive. Big capital asset requires big capital to run. So getting out of the data center can be a cost savings for the business, but the costs just go into running my workloads somewhere else. Sure, okay. The other main one that I think a lot of people look at, and by the way, data center exit is also pushed a lot by COVID. This has actually come up a lot in a lot of these migrations that have accelerated, is because people don't want to go back to the office. They also don't want to go back to their data centers. So they want to get out of that. They also don't want the overhead of paying for and owning a whole data center that goes along with that. They want to be more agile with that. They're also looking at speed and agility. And again, this is driven by the pandemic more recently, but this is a big reason why a lot of companies made that move to the cloud in the first place, right? They want the speed, they want the agility, they want to adapt to change. And they would always say that, but they would never really change anything. The pandemic actually forced businesses to change their business model. And it turns out that they're able to meet new opportunities they didn't realize they had before. I can at least speak personally. Target spun up all of their little drive ups. They spun up all of their, various curbside pickup things. They didn't have that prior to the pandemic. They built all of those little pull-up lanes and parking spots in their parking lots because they needed to meet the needs of their customers who didn't feel safe going into the store, but they were still able to make the sales. And now you actually get the best of both worlds. You buy online, you show up, they put the stuff in your trunk. I always thought that this was very, very silly until now, and now I don't want to go back. I like being able to buy, drive up, they put it in the trunk, and I leave, and my shopping trip just got that much faster. The other one was telehealth. A number of hospital systems put a ton of money and effort into building telehealth for non-critical appointments, right? I can see my personal care provider, my PCP, I can see that person via telehealth. This has been a huge boon to mental health professionals, therapists, psychologists, and psychiatrists who now have the ability to meet patients who may not have had access to transport to get to their offices in the first place, but now can also see more clients because they have the ability to do that from literally anywhere. And finally, and the least sexy of the options here, or the main goals, is the operating model. And your CIO and CFO care a lot more about this than the technical people do, but this is huge. The pandemic has kind of shown that holding assets is not really such a great idea. Holding on to these things that make it very, very difficult and put a big burden on the bottom line of the business, there's a lot of B's in there, putting that burden on the business is hard to get rid of. being able to move into an OpEx model, being able to get from going from own to operate can make you much more agile and able to keep up with changes as things go along. You don't have this anchor of a building or of an asset to worry about when you know, okay, if we don't do this anymore, we're just not paying for it anymore. We're going to go do a thing over here. It makes it much more simple and it makes the business much more agile. But what we have to do here is choose wisely. And choosing wisely involves governance. And I know that this doesn't sound like an optimization of cost, but there's more cost to this than just the baseline bill, right? We want to make sure that we have the capabilities to actually get to where we want to go. I'm not going to land my retail site in AWS and then put the payment system in Azure, even if it's cheaper directly to run it in Azure, right? Well, this instance costs $50 over here in AWS, it'll cost me $30 in Azure. Why wouldn't I do that? Oh, because I'm going to spend a bunch of money on egress fees going each way, and we don't have anything in Azure yet, so why am I running out to Azure? It makes it simpler for us to do things. Not all of the costs come into play there. And by putting this asset, this payment system into AWS, so my payment system and my retail site are together, I actually save both financially because I don't have a bunch of egress costs, and operationally because I'm not trying to manage things across clouds. How do I secure things across multiple clouds? We have a lot more to talk about on that, don't worry. But when we do those sorts of things, it can be very, very hard. We also, as part of this governance, want to put up guardrails, not stop signs. We want to make sure that as we're going, that we're not necessarily veering off because we see a new and shiny thing, right? So if I'm inside of, say, Expedient in Azure, do I really need to run to AWS if I can get what I need out of Azure or Expedient? Do I need to do that? The answer might be yes, and that's okay. But we need to make sure we're setting up the guardrails so that everybody knows what is the straight and narrow and what's going to be supported and how we are going to make sure that we don't just spin up random costs all over the place that make it very difficult to see. And I don't also want to stop anybody from doing things, because if I put the stop sign on, everybody just drives around it. I don't want to gate anything. Let's make this easy so that everybody's on the same page and nobody feels like somebody's in their way. The other thing we need to do is think about more than just the cloud bill. And I mentioned this earlier with governance. The bottom line on your bill is not the only number you need to think about. What is the opportunity cost of spinning up a new cloud? What are the opportunity costs of not using our existing clouds? What are the costs that we have to have in training? What are the costs that we have in support? Do we need to bring in consultants? What do we need to do that is beyond just how much is this thing going to cost me month to month? So when we think about these sorts of things, you're not just optimizing your bill, you're optimizing the business along with it. But let's face it, a lot of people want to shrink the cloud bill too. So how do we do that? We have to know our consumption. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with my good friend here, the kilowatt. But the kilowatt is a device, you plug it into your outlet, and then you plug your things into the outlet, and it monitors the amount of power that you're using on a regular basis, right? So I have back here my home lab. I don't know if you've ever seen my background fully here, but I have a home lab back here. And my home lab has a bunch of power usage, right? I have 2 servers, I have some storage back there, and that can be a really big power draw. And in order for me to understand how much power I'm using, I run everything through the kilowatt, and I can say, okay, my lab is using 300 watts of power. I pay 16 cents per kilowatt hour in total on my bill. So 300 times 0.16 is, off the top of my head, 48 cents, $4.80, I believe. Okay, that's expensive. I should shut that down so that I don't use this overall. And that continuous monitoring can be a big boon. I know what I'm using. I know now what I'm spending. And if I want to save some money on my electric bill, I turn that off or I shut that down. This is really hard to do across multiple clouds because You have to look in 3 different places to see where all of those things are. So by having a tool that can continuously monitor, you can see what's going on and where your money's actually going. The other thing we need to do is right size our usage. We want to make sure that as we're utilizing these things, that we're not oversizing things. We don't have to do that anymore, everybody. That's an on-prem thought, right? I have these amount of resources and I need to make sure that I'm oversized by 20% so I have the headroom in case, just in case some new users come into the platform. But the problem is that that's because you have a very finite set of resources and you need to make sure that those are available. In a cloud, the resources aren't finite. So you can say, I'm going to use this for my steady state. And if I need to burst up, we can do that. And then I can shrink it back down. Right sizing your usage can produce big results, especially if those changes seem small. Let's take, for example, EC2. If I go from a T3 large to a T3 medium, I can see a really sizable enough savings, but it doesn't look that way. It may be, oh, this is only a $30 a month savings. $30, who cares? Well, 30 times 12, because it's a monthly charge, that's $360 a year. Multiply that by 3 for 3 years, that's $1,000 over 3 years. Not a small number. Now multiply that by 10 VMs, 20 VMs, 50 VMs, and you can start to see large multiple figure savings that the business can actually say, hey, we're actually doing the smart thing here. We're not just spending our money willy-nilly in the cloud. We actually are able to make those changes. And in order to do things like this, you need a tool. And we have one. So we have our Expedient Cost Control. This is a full cost overview, so I can connect all of my individual accounts and see my true cloud spend. Because if you've got a bunch of developers who have already run out to AWS, they probably all have different accounts with different POs. You can organize those under AWS organizations, but there's also a way to do it in here where I pull all of the usage in. So I don't have to ask Mary in accounting politely for all of the nice Amazon accounts, all the nice Amazon charges we've spent over the last month. I get them in a dashboard and I can drill deeper on them. I can group things together. So I can connect my AWS and Azure accounts for my development team into a dev team group, and I can see what the dev team is spending across AWS and Azure together. That's actually really, really hard to do with the individual clouds because they don't ever talk to each other, right? And then I have the ability to schedule reports on demand, or schedule reports or run them on demand. So I can take my reports, and if my C-suite doesn't want to log into this, and I don't blame them, right? I can just send them a report and say, this is how much we spent this month or this week or today. And I can get very granular to show them where their spend is going. I can also run them on demand. So if somebody says, hey, can you show me what the dev team ran over the last month? Great, here's a report of just that. I can also analyze those costs in real time. So I can see what I'm spending in each individual cloud, and I can break that down by tag. So instead of having to build a custom report every time, I can use the analytics to do that. I get really, really granular spend out of this one interface. I can also optimize my costs during deployment as part of our continuous optimization. So I can see how much I'm going to spend up front. Now, again, financial costs aren't the only thing that we need to look at. We need to think about opportunity costs and so on and so forth. But by having the ability to see what I'm spending up front, I know that this is the amount that my budget needs to go up, or that's inside of our budget and we're good. And that optimizing of costs up front just keeps everybody on their toes to make sure that they're not overspending. And if they just say, well, whatever, you know that they saw the numbers up front. I can also right size my deployments based on use. So I can say in this example over here, I have a VM where it's a T3 large. And it should be a T3 medium. It has 8 gigs of RAM assigned to it right now, but we're only using like 400 megs. We could drop that down to 4 gigs, still have plenty of headroom, but I save $30 a month. That's $1,000 over 3 years. It's actually a big savings. And we continuously monitor for improvements, because maybe that guidance box was only small because we just deployed it and we don't have any use on it. Great. We can spin that up and take it up further if we need to. So if you want to learn more about this, you can go to our website. You can go to expedient.com/services/assessments and sign up for a free cloud assessment. You can do dependency mapping. You can see full host inventory. You can see what your right clouds for your workloads would be and compare them side by side so that you have the best information going forward. You can also go to expedient.com/services/multi-cloud, and you can see our full multi-cloud vision. We have a number of different tools available now and coming this year that we're very, very excited about. And if you want to learn more about cost control, you should join us next week because we're going to do a live demo on the platform. We're going to dive deep on what cost control does, how it does it, and how it can help you with your multi-cloud journey. And with that, I'm going to open up for questions. We got a lot of questions here. I'm just going to answer this first one here. After seeing you in multiple sessions, I've been wondering what's the poster on the wall behind me. This one is Explore America. We got a little camper here. This one over here is a vintage U.S. Steel safety poster that asked me if my workplace is safe, and it is. So here you go. Thanks for the there's a little behind the scenes. Is it a mistake to decide cost metrics prior to migrating to the cloud, or should that be part of the process and allow for metrics to be adjusted and added after some experience? I think understanding is it a mistake to decide cost metrics? No. I think what you should be doing is considering the right cloud for the right workload. So this is what our assessment tool does. So you can actually compare those up front. You'll see what your workloads would look like in Azure, in AWS, in Google. So you don't have to, try to figure that out, figure it out after the fact, and then try to figure out how to migrate between clouds because this is where you really wanted it to land. You can actually land it in the right place the first time. So expedient.com/services/assessments. Go sign up for a free assessment and it'll help you with those cost metrics. You will also have to consider cost metrics and adjusting those afterwards based on, does your workload really fit in a cloud, specifically, commodity off-the-shelf software doesn't always fit in AWS or in Azure. It's actually a much better fit in Expedient's Enterprise Cloud. But those are things that you can tweak as part of that process. So a seasonal high load application can be very cost/load friendly. It can be, but your application has to be designed for it. So if I know that my background's in healthcare and specifically health insurance. So yeah, I knew every year from October to February that's open enrollment season in the US. So I knew that my applications needed to be available and bigger and able to handle every single one of our members signing up for their service. In June, or in April, it's real quiet and I can back that off. So there can be a cost-friendly capability there, but that's based on your applications, that's based on their growth, that's based on their capabilities, and not every application can do that. For teams that have gotten really efficient with decoupled thinking and processes, LOL, I like that one. Any tips for introducing a new tool like Expedient without throwing a monkey wrench into current processes? I think the big key thing here is that you can actually bring this tool in and maybe point out that they're not so efficient. But you can also use this just overall to give your C-suite and your top level directors an idea of where that spend is actually going. You don't have to flip all the processes up on themselves. You should probably look into more governance to make sure that that doesn't continue, but you can use this tool as information to actually give you a better idea of what's going on, because sometimes people don't always tell the full truth. They'll tell the truth, not all of it. How do multiple cloud systems handle/assign ownership of data in regards to geographical locations for governmental regulations like GDPR and security policies when not stored in a permanent data center building? Data ownership is hard. And this is part of that governance process. If you have something that requires is there any sort of, data requirement, like this data has to live in Europe, this data has to live in the US, and I've lived that life before. That's something that you have to consider as part of the governance process. And if this application touches that data, it needs to stay inside of US data centers. I can at least say for Expedient's sake, all of our data centers are in the US. We have no international operations that you would replicate into unless you were really trying to do that. So it's not something that you have to really worry about. I think in the case of AWS, or Azure or Google, that is also something that you can work through as part of those clouds. Your data doesn't necessarily stay in that one data center, but it will likely stay inside of that region or availability zone. How do you monitor and manage a multi-cloud environment? This is our cost control tool. There's many more features coming as part of this tool to help monitor and manage that environment. So right now we started up front with cost optimization. There are other things that you can do around deployments and making sure that you have a standard process for deploying things in to help manage your sprawl. But then from a monitoring standpoint, our existing monitoring tools today can do that because they happen in guest, but we can also do things additionally with network monitoring tools too. If someone is new to the cloud, are there any cloud providers I would advise against using? No, that's mean, right? I think there are plenty of cloud providers out there that do a great job and they all hit different needs, right? You have the providers like DigitalOcean and Linode that do a really great job for developers who want nothing to think about with the infrastructure and they really want to focus on their specific applications and they just need a place to put it. That's great. AWS, Azure, GCP have massive platform as a service capabilities that are really hard to replicate on-prem, and that's why people come to AWS and Azure and Google to use those services. Enterprise clouds like Expedient and others in our space can have the ability to take on those VMware workloads without having all of the headaches of trying to refactor those applications. So this is why we talk about the right cloud for the right workload. This is why customers use more than one cloud, because they want the capabilities without having to think about, oh, how do I shove everything into this one particular provider? Any capabilities to use tags or similar concepts to assign individual projects in the case of multiple projects using a single cloud account for different applications to assign to teams? Okay, let's work through this sentence. I'm sorry, the question's a little confusing as it was asked. Yes, so I can tag things. I can also group things together, and I can link multiple accounts into a group. So you can utilize that to be able to tag things together. So I can tag this as Big Business Project, and Big Business Project is a tab or is a tag that I can build all of my analytics and reporting off of. So there is grouping there too. There's also organizational grouping and just the pure cloud grouping to say this is all Azure, this is all AWS, this is all Expedient. Cost control webinar sign up URL. You can go to expedient.com. Right at the top of the page, you'll see the events area, and you can click in there. Are IBM mainframe-based clouds harder to monitor and manage? No. There's a whole bunch of mainframe tools out there. I know CA for years has been doing that. But if you're utilizing mainframe, there's a reason you have it. And if you need to monitor and manage it, there are tools to do that. How does there's a question here about a partner and assessments. Reach out to me, AJ.Kuftic. We can get deeper details on that. What tool do we use for cloud cost analysis? That is our Expedient cost control tool. So you can see that next week. We can even do some demos off of that if you'd like to. So yes, Expedient cost control is there. The thing that sets us apart from our competitors, we have a fantastic team of technical individuals, about 300 of us. Between me and the front end, all of our solutions architects, our delivery team, our operations team, our product ops teams, we have a fantastic team of people who are trying to build the best products possible that allow you to get your time back. And you actually get access to 300 people who want the best thing for you. So what sets us apart is our capability to deliver and support our products going forward. And we're constantly evolving to keep up with everything that our customers are asking for. Does Expedient have tools or other resources that would help with over-provisioning or cloud waste? Yes, that is our cost control tool. We also have our assessment tool, so you can see before you move, and then you can use cost control to see what you've got in the cloud today and how to actually monitor that going forward. With that, we're going to wrap up here, and I just wanted to double check there. Thank you very much. The winner of today's Amazon gift card is Craig Davis. Congratulations, Craig. Karen will be reaching out to you soon. You can also please join us next week for our Expedient Cost Control demo webinar. You can go to expedient.com. Up at the top of the page, you can register for that. Super looking forward to seeing the rest of you as part of our Cloud Cost Optimization Month. And we will join you next week. Thanks.